to Cardiff Trades Council May Day celebration and solidarity to every trades council up and down the country that's actually organising events today and over the weekends. It's great to see people in 3D, but obviously make sure you're all safe as well. Last year we had to do this online, so we're doing a combination this year with small numbers of us at the demonstration and the rally, and also it's live streaming on Facebook, so if you can share that, that'd be great as well. You know, really, we've had a real year, a really difficult year for everybody, and it's a struggle for all trade unions up and down the country, but what is absolutely clear is that every workplace, every section of the workforce across the country, it's trade union reps and our members that have been defending the safety and protecting workers up and down the country. We've had to fight for every single safety measure in our workplaces. It's been our reps that have been doing that. We haven't had anything handed to us on a plate. And union organised workplaces are the safest workplaces that we have. We need to keep fighting and make sure that we get the support we need. All the support, the financial support for the working class has been fought for by our movement as well. The government and politicians haven't handed us anything on a plate. And without our NHS workers, our teachers and teachers' assistants, our care workers, our transport workers, our supermarket workers, our civil servants processing benefits and paying furlough payments. All of those things and many, many more, the countless areas of work the workers have been protecting our lives and providing our services. It's been absolutely vital. And without all these workers up and down the country, then our lives and our communities would have fallen apart. But it hasn't been the CEOs, it hasn't been the billionaires, it hasn't been Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson or any of the millionaires that have actually helped us. It's been workers that have kept our society going. We're not the ones being rewarded. It's the lobbyists and the spivs and the speculators that have made an absolute fortune out of the pandemic. Absolutely disgracefully. And then what do workers expect? We expect the world, but what we're being offered is a pay freeze. And disgracefully, NHS workers have been offered a paltry 1%. Absolutely disgraceful. We saw politicians clap for health workers at the start of the pandemic, and now it's a clap in the face for those workers. We need to fight to make sure that everybody gets a decent reward for the services that are given and decent pay rise to actually take us out of the poverty wages that we're on. The bosses and the government are attempting to use the pandemic to make themselves, enrich themselves, but also to attack our terms and conditions, our jobs and our livelihoods. And we must make sure we don't let that happen. It's British Gas, British Telecom, British Airways are all using the pandemic to try and cut jobs, workers' pay and services, often using fire and rehire. And we must fight to make sure that fire and rehire is made illegal. And that includes all the Tory, Liberal and Labour councils, including RCT, that have used it as well. We need to make sure that public organisations don't use it, as well as fighting the private bosses as well. But we have learned our power, the millions of us that have been providing those services, and what matters in society in terms of what we need to make sure our lives are better. You know, parents can't go to work without teachers caring and educating our children. Rubbish does not get collected without council workers. We would not get food on our tables without the food manufacturers, distribution and supermarket workers. Wouldn't get benefits and pensions paid without our civil servants, just to name a few. So we can see who really holds society together. It's ordinary working class people. And what we need to do is make sure that we use our collective strength to withdraw our labour and push forward to make sure that the attacks on our class and on our workplaces and our workers are defeated. The past year has exposed what matters, and going forward we need to build for a better society. Our banner, the Trades Council banner, sums up what we need. Unite for socialism. And we can win if we build a leadership of our movement that's prepared to stand up and fight. So it's great to see the turnout today. We've got some excellent speakers for the rally as well. And our first speaker is Mairead Canavan. Glad to see she's been recently re-elected to the NEC of her union, the NEU, and very welcome to speak at our rally.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi everyone, it's good to be here today on this International Workers' Day, especially after the 14 months we've all had, not only fighting for our jobs but fighting for our lives actually. In schools, the NEU has been, in schools and colleges, the NEU has been, from the very beginning of the pandemic, since last March, we've been fighting for the health and safety of our members. And we have had many successes. We've had to fight long and hard for critically vulnerable members and vulnerable members at the beginning to be able to work from home. So we were involved right at the beginning when schools were forced to close to all but vulnerable and children. When schools reopened just before the summer, it was much safer actually, because there were fewer numbers. We had rotas, and it was much safer than it had been at the beginning of the pandemic. However, we had a lot of worries about being back in school, and we were lucky that then we had the summer coming up, and we had a break, obviously, when we hoped that the virus would get better, and that in September it would be a much safer return to schools. However, during the summer we had the Eat Out to Help Out, and numbers rose again. And then in September, when it would have been better for there to have been rotas for different year groups, different classes to go back at different times, all of the children were sent back all together, and again numbers started rising. And this went on throughout the autumn term until at the end of the autumn term it was quite alarming how much numbers had risen. And all of this time the NEU and other unions were rallying English and Welsh governments to try and make sure that members were safe, to try and close schools a couple of weeks before Christmas, because obviously the decision had been made that everybody could gather together at Christmas, over Christmas, even though the numbers were really high. So we did, in the end, we managed to get Welsh government, this didn't happen in England, agreed to close a week early for secondary schools and a few days early for primary schools, so that we could isolate before meeting family members. Over Christmas, you'll all be aware that the numbers rose alarmingly. And then when it came to the first weekend in January, the NEU had to really be tougher than we had ever been before during the pandemic. And we had to, in the end, we had to use Section 44 across England and Wales in order to keep schools closed and to stop governments from opening schools. They wanted to send all children back, even though, the virus was really alarming at that time. And in fact, before Christmas, just to go back a bit, before Christmas, Boris Johnson, when the Welsh Government had agreed to close schools, Boris Johnson was busy trying to sue councils who wanted to close schools a week early in order to keep their communities safe. So on this weekend, just before school started, while all this chaos was going on, we'd used Section 44. I want to tell you the story of one member of the NEU. I mean, there was lots of educators were isolating and suffering with the virus, and this is the story of just one of them. Donna Coleman worked in Burnley College, and she was 42 years old. She complained for a long time during the autumn term, constantly to her sister. She said how unsafe she felt in school, and her sisters wanted her to report the college. They felt it was unsafe in the practices around COVID, and she was afraid to report the college to the HSE. Her sister said she would report the college, but Donna was afraid of losing her job if her name came out. So she thought about reporting to her union, UCU, but she also thought that would come back to her and that she would lose her job. But you know, unknowns to her, UCU were already involved. So UCU were involved and were very worried about what was going on at the college. But it did remain open with what they thought was inadequate safety protocols in place. Waves of infection crashed through the college, which by the latter half of the autumn term was in Tier 3 of England. The first COVID outbreak was in October. At least 22 individuals were required to isolate. At the end of November, there was another outbreak. At least 4 members of staff tested positive for COVID in the department where Donna worked. And she kept going to work. She kept calling her sisters to express her concerns. She kept going for COVID tests because she would lie about her symptoms, say she had symptoms because she was so worried about taking COVID into the college and spreading it. And then in mid-December there was another outbreak and at least 12 teachers tested positive. Donna's head had to close the department because so many people were off sick, and Donna was one of them. She fell ill on the 11th of December and tested positive on the 14th. At home, members of Barney College messaged each other about the situation in dismay, saying that the virus was sweeping the staff room again. Donna was suffering from a fever and an aching head. She couldn't eat and she spent most of her time sleeping. And when she was awake, she urged colleagues to get tests and said everybody needs to go remote or shut down. Still, she wasn't fearful for her life because she was only 42. Mostly she was upset that she would have to spend Christmas on her own. Donna lived alone and was in a support bubble with her mum and dad. She went, sorry, just let me get to... So what happened was that over the course of, since she went in on the 29th, by the time it got to the 3rd, the hospital told her they needed to put her on a ventilator. And then on the 6th of January, her family got word that she had died. She was another victim of COVID. I mean, this has happened all too often with educators, and unfortunately, you know, this is underplayed by both governments, both English and Welsh governments. They underplay how many staff we've lost. They say that COVID is not, that there's no COVID in schools. They give all sorts of ridiculous reasons. They say that it's transmitted in the communities, even though we know that it's, you know, schools are packed. And now we're at a situation after Easter where all students went back at the same time again, even though it would have been safer to stagger the return, but they all went back at once. And we're just waiting to see if it all plays out again, and it probably will. It started already. We have year groups who have been isolating already. They've got to isolate for a day or two until they figure out which bubbles have to continue isolating for the 10 days. And you know, there's just a lot of worries about. We can see what's going on in India, and we're just waiting to see what's going to happen with the virus again here. And we have no doubt that we are going to have to stand up for educators again and insist that vulnerable people are protected, because there's a huge push, there has been a huge push since before Christmas for vulnerable people to be back in school even though they don't feel safe. So today, what we have to do on this International Workers' Day is remember the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you.
Thanks, Mairead, and I think certainly that's a very clear reason why trade unionists need to fight for safety. We're also a union that has got a very proud record of struggling collectively to protect the safety of its members, and we saw that at the beginning of January that resulted in the U-turns of both the Westminster government but also the Senedd as well in terms of the return to schools. So thanks, Mairead. Our next speaker is Andrew Wilkes, a Unite electrician, construction worker, and you may have seen the video of the direct action that the Sparks did yesterday outside outside the site at Cardiff University yesterday. And I think certainly the big companies that are absolutely raking in the money, like NG Bailey's and Balfour Beatty, are trying to get electricians on the cheap and de-skilling that work. And quite frankly, I don't want to have unskilled electricians putting electrics into a nuclear power station just across the water from us. So Andrew, very welcome to speak at our rally.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the rank and file electricians up and down the country. For the last 2 months, various days of the week, in the big cities, including Cardiff, Swansea, we've been holding demonstrations outside building sites aimed at the ones that NG Bailey's and Balfour Beatty are working on. And the reason why is because just across the water, as Catherine said, you've got Hinkley Point Power Station. It's going vastly over budget, and one of the brainwaves they've come up with to save some money or increase their profits is, rather than have electricians doing the electrical work on there, they want to train up guys on a 2-month course to do a vast majority of the electrical work, whereas we want proper apprentices, 4-year apprenticeships, whether they're school leavers or adult trainees. We don't want these what we call dilutees in there doing the work for cheap, on the cheap. You know, you would normally call this type of workman a cowboy or a chancer. You know, I wouldn't trust them to put a battery in my torch, let alone build a nuclear power station. And if they get away with it there, they'll get away with it everywhere. And we haven't got any faith in this lot here, the Welsh Government, because we've got a procurement policy which is supposed to ban unethical employment on any Welsh Government funded contracts. And you've got schools and hospitals being built right now, and most of the boys on them are bogus self-employed. They've got no other option than to take that type of work. They won't be allowed to, you can't get a job what we call directly paid. You're bogus self-employed. And then you've got the umbrella payment schemes, which you pay £20 to have your wages processed. You pay, believe it or not, employers' national insurance and employees' national insurance. If you get any holiday pay, it's rolled into your rate. You forget bank holiday payments. And the procurement policy is supposed to outlaw all that, but to me it's just a book of words. You know, it's what I call lip service. And they need to start acting on it, not just writing it down in a book. And I got a couple more things to say. Yeah, like I say, and it's not just construction, the 0-hour contracts, it's outrageous, you know. Why are things getting worse for the workers? When I left school, you'd have proper jobs, you'd get all, you know, holiday pay, overtime rates. Now they just want everyone on 0 hours, and does my head in. You know, all in it together, my bloody backside. Network Rail, my young mate, he couldn't get a job. Someone said, oh, why didn't you get a job on Network Rail? They're getting paid loads, them boys on the railways. He had to spend nearly £2,000 out of his own pocket to do a passport to safety. Then they say, oh, right, okay, right, where's the job then? Well, we'll phone you up when we want you. So I think it's like a Wednesday or a Thursday, they'll phone him and say, well, there's work in Reading on a Saturday night and Sunday night, £11 an hour for working on a railway, outdoors, you know, bloody charming. And then the next weekend they might not even phone him, so he's sat home with his fingers somewhere. Anyway, if I get any angry, I'm going to go home and smash up all my John Lewis furniture, because if it's not good for Boris's missus, it's not good enough for mine. And kill the bill. Thank you.
Cheers, Andrew. And I think we've got quite a few sparks in the audience. And Cardiff Trades Council will make sure we advertise the next protest. And let's see if we can get a large number of trade unions there backing this attack on workers. You know, every electrician should get the rate for the job, and we need to oppose the de-skilling. And the Trades Council stood firmly behind the electricians when they were fighting Besna and the attacks then, and we'll do the same this time as well. Our next speakers, as we've mentioned, health workers have been under attack. Our two speakers from Unison and GMB have had various issues arise, as happens in health workers' lives. But we're very pleased to say that we've got Helen Perriam here, another health worker, who will outline the fight back for decent pay, but also decent services and resourcing for our NHS workers, which is so vitally needed here in Wales, and she's about to come, so I'll fill in a bit. It's absolutely disgraceful that public sector workers are facing a pay freeze. The 1% insulting pay rise for NHS workers is horrendous. And given the year we've had, nobody could do without an NHS worker at the moment. We need as many as possible. There shouldn't be agency workers in those workplaces. They should all be directly employed. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, my name's Helen. I used to be a mental health nurse, but now I'm a health visitor in the community. And I just want to bring solidarity to this rally on behalf of all NHS workers. Like everyone here, NHS workers have had a difficult year. Some of us have lost colleagues and tens of thousands of us have caught COVID. Hundreds of us have died while looking after patients. I'm proud of my colleagues. We're all very grateful for the massive support that the public have given to us. But I'm also really angry. I'm angry at the lack of support from what we need from the top. I want to thank the Cardiff Trades Council for organising this rally today, because the last year has shown that workers are going to have to stand up for themselves to get what we need. It's a disgrace that NHS workers in Wales have had to take to social media to try and ensure the supply of protective equipment that is really needed. It's a disgrace that there are private companies making billions of pounds out of a testing system that failed when we needed it. But above all, it's a disgrace that we are now facing a pay cut in real terms as a reward. I want to call on the Welsh Government to state clearly that we will break ranks with the Tories in England and pledge to give NHS workers in Wales a 50% pay rise they deserve. A 1% pay rise isn't good enough. A one-off £500 payment isn't good enough. 4% isn't good enough. None of these figures is going to convince workers, like myself, to stay after the year we've had and guard against the collapse. NHS workers have lost 20% pay over the last 10 years, while the billionaires have got richer and richer. We are demanding that money back. We went into this pandemic with understaffed hospitals due to years of cuts. Here in Wales, we've had the lowest number of intensive care beds per person in Western Europe. At the height of austerity, the Welsh Government passed on £1 billion of cuts demanded by the Tories. With more COVID austerity threatening us, we need to get ready to fight harder than ever. I hope everyone here will support us in that fight. NHS workers have organised themselves to march to demand a 50% pay rise here in Cardiff and around other towns and cities. Our union should have been organising those marches. We need more from those at the top. The Welsh Labour government was still trying to close down services as the pandemic arrived. Workers had to join with service users to fight plans to close the 24-hour A&E at Royal Glamorgan. Before that, we had to march to save the Sam Davis ward in Barry Hospital. I'm supporting candidates like Beth Webster, a nurse at UHW Hospital, who is standing as part of the trade union and socialist coalition, and I hope you will too. Beth has helped organise the campaign for 15% and has pledged to fight all cuts. This year has shown that it is in everyone's interest to make sure our NHS has the resources it needs. It has also shown that workers will have to get organised and be prepared to fight for those resources. Solidarity to all workers on May Day, those invested in struggle and on picket lines. Thank you.
you very much. Thanks, Helen, and certainly I think you have our full support. We organised a rally when the autumn budget was announced against the pay freeze for public sector workers, and we'll make sure whoever's elected in the Senate behind us next week, they get to hear the full strength of the trade union movement. It's very clear Wales TUC policy that we should be fighting for the funds and the resources to pay all public sector workers a decent pay rise and make sure that money is caught up from years of pay restraint. Very much welcome our next speaker, another picket line that the Trades Council has been very proud to support. A very small picket line, but perfectly formed in terms of CWU engineers. But Eugene Kaparas is going to come and speak in terms of the CWU telecoms battle, a big battle against British Telecom involving 40,000 workers.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. I'm Eugene Capros and I represent workers in British Telecom across South Wales. At the moment, nationally, we are in dispute with British Telecom, with 170 repayment project engineers out on strike week after week. They're not defending their own personal terms and conditions though. That they've tried to buy them off by telling them they're safe. They defended the terms and conditions of the job of the people coming behind them, because BT want to cut the pay, they want to increase the hours, and they want to introduce on contracts, government contracts, where it is illegal to make profit. They want to put them on performance-related pay. That is Kim Mears, OBE, her department. She wants to give these people a task to get as much money as possible out of government contracts, out of your pockets, when they're building roads, roundabouts, shifting BT's network. By law, they're supposed to find the cheapest route, the least disruption, to save the taxpayer money, and BT are now seeing that as a revenue stream. But it's not just that one. Those guys are a vanguard and they're out there. But very shortly, 40,000 BT workers will be hit a vote called the Campaign Campaign, where we're going to be in an all-out strike across the UK against cuts to terms and conditions, downsizing of the company. In Wales, well, in the UK, we're going from 300 sites down to 30, and in Wales they promised us only one, that we will still have Cardiff. We've got thousands of workers across South Wales. We've asked them, please, just tell us that Merthyr Tydfil will be safe, that Swansea will be safe, and year after year they're refusing to give us that. All they've told us is we have a stay of execution until next spring. They're sending a very clear message to the people of Wales that we want your money, but we don't want you. And frankly, it's just not good enough. This isn't a company cutting costs, thank you. This isn't a company cutting costs to make a profit. This isn't a company fighting for survival. They're making billions of pounds from a country that's gone online in the last year. But it's not about money, it's about control. And Philip Jensen, the CEO of BT, wants to make absolutely certain that everyone knows he's the man in charge. When his own chairman, the man who gave him the job, disagreed with his plans, he made him walk the plank. I once read that in an empty village, the donkey is king. Philip Jensen is doing his best to empty the village as quick as he can. We have many issues with the way the BT are being run, but we haven't been on strike, on a national strike, since 1987. And that proves that we can work together. We've gone through mass change, huge technological revolutions, and huge downsizing necessary with the change in technology. But we've always done it without making people redundant, without compulsory redundancies. Mr. Johnson doesn't just want to introduce compulsory redundancies on people, but he wants to punish them if they exercise their legal right to consultation. If you try and take it, he'll take your enhanced redundancy pay off you. So you'll be left after a career of 40 years in work with a few weeks' pay. It's not enough to kick you out the door, but they want to empty your pockets on the way out too. And the people who are going to suffer when we go out on strike, the people who are going to suffer are going to be the communities who rely on their communications. It'll be the businesses that can't fulfill their order. Even their friends in the city won't be able to trade their stocks uninterrupted, but they don't care because it's all about control. So I won't go on forever because I'll end up bursting a blood vessel. But the question has been posed, what is the answer? What are we going to do? Well, the answer is the same as it always has been. Join the union, vote Labour, and in solidarity we can make tomorrow better than today. Thank you.
Thanks, Eugene, and all the support of your members balloting at the moment, and certainly we'll be there fighting with you. And as Eugene said, BT, quite frankly, has made a fortune, and there's absolutely no excuse for them to attack their workforce, apart from bucks in their bosses' pockets. Our next speaker is the other half of the perfectly formed CWU, the postal side, our very own Abhishek Singh. So he's a stalwart of our Trades Council. Many years has been involved in our Trades Council, and very welcome to talk about the struggles of his members in the postal services. Thanks.
Comrades, colleagues, I bring solidarity from the Communication Workers Union, and with that solidarity, all those who've taken industrial action and those are balloting to take industrial action, because this is a turning moment in our history. We've had bosses pick businesses up on the back of COVID. Everybody says we want to go back to normal. Well, a trade union movement doesn't want to go back to normal. We don't want to be shafted with our pay and terms and conditions. We want a platform where we decide what we want with our terms and conditions. Equal power. We want some of the profits that the big businesses make. We don't want the crumbs on the sides. We want to make decisions. We want to be around the boardrooms. We want to be around the negotiating table. So we don't want what we had before. We want an equal path for our workers. And we don't want it for ourselves. We want it for our children, our grandchildren, and our generations to come behind us. Because if we don't stand now, we'll have nothing. Let me tell you, we will have nothing. We have to fight. We have to stand. We have to fight to make sure we have future generations, not in Wales only, but across everywhere we look. All nations, workers have a right to be fed properly, and look after their children, look after their parents. And in the conditions we are now, we cannot even look after ourselves. As Eugene says, when the BT go to strike, it won't only be the people who are striking that'll be affected, it'll be those communities, because the money will not be fed through to them communities. People won't be able to spend money in them communities. So we have to stand. We have to stand and fight, and we have to make sure we have a future for our generation. Solidarity, solidarity, all of us on May Day today.
Right, I'd like to welcome our next speaker, who's Bianca Ali from Black Lives Matter. Clearly, a lot of battles going on in this country, but also internationally. But unfortunately, we've seen instances within Cardiff that have hit the national and international news. Bianca rose to prominence, fighting for justice for Mohammed Hassan. A Cardiff Trades Council taking a firm stance to call for an inquiry into Mohammed, but also justice for Bashir, Christopher Kapeza, and also Sianda Mgaza. And I think certainly a woman that's spending 4 years disgracefully in prison for defending herself from a racist attack. So very much welcome Bianca Ali. No justice, no peace.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so as you heard briefly about Sianda Mgaza, she was attacked by 2 white men and a white woman, all twice her age, whilst camping in Brecon. whilst being racially attacked, both physically and verbally, the police attended and arrested Sianda for using self-defence. Now, she's serving 4.5 years in prison. We need to get Sianda home. If you don't know about this case, I urge you to go and visit the Free Sianda website. Do all you can, write to your MPs, write to Sianda, let her know that you're thinking of her. Yeah, we need to free Sianda. In the case of Mahmoud Hassan, South Wales Police did initially release a statement at the beginning of this horrible case, saying that they had nothing to do with Mahmoud's death and evidence would prove wise. Since then, 6 police officers have been done for misconduct. Another police officer has been done for false entries into custody records. If they had absolutely nothing to do with Mahmoud's death, why are police officers being put into further investigation by the IOPC for misconduct, for false entries into custody records? Mahmoud's case is not the only one that we've heard about this year. Moya Bashir, another man from Newport, a young black man, family called the police for help. He was going through a mental health crisis. They wanted him escorted safely to a hospital where he could seek further help. The police did not do this. They killed Moya Bashir in his bedroom in front of his parents. This is the second case in the matter of 8 weeks that we've seen here in Cardiff. It's disgusting. The police are institutionally racist, and we need this to stop. We need down with the police, defund the police, leading to eventual abolishment. Yeah. All these cases just sum up how racist the police are. We've had the case of Christopher Capessa, a young boy who was killed by white peers. It was not in the public interest to pursue an arrest in this case. The person who was found to be guilty of his death, it wasn't in the public interest to put him behind bars. How and why? If you flip this case on his head and it was 15 black boys and 1 white boy, it would be all of them black boys that are arrested and put into prison, every single one of them done for murder. But we don't see that in the case of Christopher Capessa. It's not in the public interest to pursue an actual conviction. It's disgusting. The police are institutionally racist. We need this to stop. Today is International Workers' Day and National Kill the Bill, which is an attack on all of our lives. It allows the police to continue to brutalise black and brown people. We must stop this bill and protect all of our rights. Kill the bill! Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bianca, and thanks to every single person that stood up and organised protests and fought back throughout the pandemic. We will not be denied the right to protest. So Bianca's shown the way in Cardiff, but we've seen trade unionists up and down the country make sure that we keep our right to protest, our right to strike. And congratulations to Unite that last year fought in Yorkshire to make sure that picket lines could still be held up in a dispute in Yorkshire. They've done it in Scotland as well more recently. We cannot allow this government to bring in further legislation to further restrict our rights to protest and our rights to strike and organise picket lines. But it also shows how terrified this government is of us, that they actually think that they can introduce legislation that will stop us protesting. We will continue to do that. Cardiff Trades Council has been fully behind all the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, the Women's Lives Matter demonstrations, every single protest and picket line in this city, and we will continue to do so. So our final speaker today, I very much welcome Dave Bartlett, the Secretary of our Trades Council, to finish off our rally today.
Friends, brothers, sisters, comrades and fighters, the common theme here today, the common thread that runs through all the speakers you have heard today is the struggle that they represent at a local level, representing thousands of people in struggle or on strike or are fighting for justice. And that is, my friends, the reality of Britain today, in Johnston's COVID Britain. It's not a coincidence we're meeting here, outside the Welsh Assembly, the Senate, where elections will be taking place in the next week. We would normally hold on Workers' Day like this a march through the streets of Cardiff, as we have done for years and years. That at the moment isn't possible. But we're here for a reason, because we want to say, as working class people, as trade unionists, the last thing we want here in Cardiff is a Tory government that will copy the one we've got in London. Let's have a look at that record. 130,000 people have died in Britain through COVID. That is the worst in Europe, and all of it a result of the Tory laissez-faire incompetence that they don't care. They tell us now that we all have to make a huge sacrifice to go forward. The money tree and its branches, we are told, are bare. They're absolutely bare. There's nothing from the money tree for the millions of working class people who are unemployed, who are suffering in poverty, who are on the deadline. But my God, there's all of a sudden money from the branch to give Boris Johnson £200,000 to do up his flat. That's what modern Britain is all about. Oh yes, we're told all brothers are equal, but there's no doubt about it, some brothers are far more equal than other brothers. And that, my reality, is Britain today, because we are a society that's divided into two. On the one hand, we have the truly needy. On the other hand, we have the truly greedy. And that is Britain today, my friends. We've got millions of working people who are unemployed, who are out of work, who are in part-time, who are in poverty, who depend on the breadline, who depend on just voluntary efforts by people just even to get food. And yet, in the last year, the number of millionaires and tycoons in this country have increased their wealth by 30%. And then we have companies like British Gas, who have sacked a lot of the workforce and telling them you can only be re-employed on worse terms and conditions because it's COVID. As if people during COVID didn't need to heat up their food and to heat up their rooms. It's got absolutely nothing to do with COVID. It's got absolutely everything to do with sheer greed. And that's why, as trade unionists, we must be proud to fight alongside the young people, the Black Lives Matter protest movement and the women's movement on issues such as Kill the Bill protests that Bianca talked about. Because this bill is all about silencing the opposition of the working class, ordinary people in this country who are being asked to pay the price for COVID. And as trade unionists, we need to understand that this isn't just about the right to protest, vital as it is. This is also a bill to prevent us from being able, as trade unionists, to strike. And therefore I say to the trade union leaders, to the TUC, wake up! Wake up as to what's happening around us. If one footballer last year could bring this weak government to its knees last summer over the question of school meals, then we need to pose the question, what are the possibilities? What are the possibilities if the TUC was to mobilise the entire trade union membership of 7 million people and link up with the Black Lives Matter movement, link up with the young people, link up with the women's movement? Because if we did that, we could kill this bill dead in its tracks as we speak. And therefore, to come back to where we started, why are we meeting here at the Senate this week? Now, we understand as trade unionists, we understand that the Tories and their friends in big business will never represent the interests of the working class. Never. But I'll also say this to you. If there is to be a Wales Labour government in the next Assembly elections, we don't want from them Tory policies. And I say this because some of the omens are not very good. There's a plan now in Cardiff, you may be aware, to build a new hospital at Balindra. That's something we all welcome and we all desperately need. But what you may or may not know, this hospital is going to be built through the rotten PFI system. And what that means is, instead of building it out of taxation, instead of doing it in that way, it's going to be private investors, private tycoons who want to make money. Tycoon, sorry, although it is feeling like a tycoon here, isn't it? There'll be private investors who will be putting up the money for that and then charging over 40 years, charging in huge rents to the NHS to pay for that provision. It's an absolute disgrace, because what that means is a hospital which is estimated to cost £200 million to build, well, after PFI, actually cost 560 million. We have to say, friends, this is sheer madness. It's like Tesco policy in reverse. You get one hospital, but for the price of two. And it's a disgrace that we have to actually, as trade unionists, highlight. And I would say, therefore, in finishing, if the government, whether it be in Wales or in Westminster, if the government can find the money off the money tree to finance big business out of the NHS, then it can certainly find the money to fund the 15% to the NH workers who desperately need it after what they've done last year. And for that matter, they can find the money to fund all public sector workers. They can find the money to begin to grapple with unemployment and poverty in this country. And therefore, to finish, friends, colleagues and comrades, once again, it's the greedy demanding that the needy pay for this mess. And now is the time for the trade union movement like never before to link up with young people, to link up with the Black Lives Matter movement, to link up with the women's movement, and in doing so, forge a unity that's based on our class, the working class and ordinary people in this society, and to fight for workers' representatives in order to organise for the future a society based on justice, based on freedom, based on fairness. And in the course of doing that, let's build a society that is for the millions and not the millionaires. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave. And I think certainly what we do celebrate on International Workers' Day is the talents and the expertise of ordinary working class people that's totally underestimated by the bosses. I will give great thanks to one very talented person, the NUJ member that's helping us film this rally, Chris. Has actually made our lives 100 times easier. But the millions of us could run society far better than the bosses. The millions of us are the ones that have kept our communities going throughout the pandemic. We don't need the billionaires. We don't need the millionaires telling us what to do. We should be organising our movement to make sure we formulate the demands of what we need in society. We don't want to go back to how things were before the pandemic, as many of our speakers have said. We need to formulate and fight for a society that's a million times better than we had before. Let's fight for the future, fight for socialism, and fight for a decent future for all of us, and make sure we put our agenda centre stage, and make sure we force the politicians. As everybody has said, we've seen the government do U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. We are strong. The government is weak. We can fight and we can win. Thanks everybody for attending the rally.